Hey, welcome back, everybody. Mark from Rams Up here, going to get you caught up on a few things. The focus of this episode, though, is we're a week into free agency, well, almost, anyways, and a little bit has happened, right? So let's take stock of the Rams roster right now and what the Rams might do as far as free agency and the draft. We'll take a look at each position group and then we'll hopefully come to some conclusions. I know there's some disagreement among Ram fans about what the Rams should be doing moving forward, what positions need the most help, and so on. So we'll get into that. Before we get into that, though, it's episode 686 on the podcast. So let's talk about a player who wore number 86. And I'm going to talk about a tight end. And let me look at my cheat sheet here, make sure I pronounce this right. Tight end Brandon Humanawanoe. That's right. A tight end out of Torrance, California, attended Narbonne High School, the University of Arizona. Now, he was not your prototypical tight end, 6'2", 295 pounds. So if you're thinking blocking was his forte, you would be correct. A fourth-round pick by the Rams in 2001, played 5 seasons for the Rams, had 66 catches for 648 yards and 6 TDs. Went on to play for 4 years for the Chargers, 1 year for the Bears. And maybe the highlight of his career, unfortunately, came against the Rams. He didn't show up in this stat sheet much, but he was a big part of the Chargers rushing attack in one game in particular, in the blocking aspect of that running attack, and the Rams got kind of destroyed by the Chargers that day. But Brandon, the tight end out of the University of Arizona, I'm not going to try as you guys know how much I struggle with names, and this one's a doozy. And hey, in 100 episodes, maybe we'll talk about another tight end that wore number 86, Michael Humanawanoe. Came a little bit later. 2 tight ends with perhaps the most difficult names to pronounce in the history of the National Football League. Both played for the Rams, both drafted by the Rams, and had moments with the Rams. Michael went on to play for the Patriots, made his mark there. And Brandon, I think, was a little bit more productive with the Chargers than with the Rams. So let's rehash the Rams signing so far. They brought in Devontae Adams, obviously, and Poona Ford, re-signed Jimmy G, and brought Coleman Shelton back. And I kind of glossed over recently the addition of Tutu Atwell. And then they brought back Larrell Murchison, a defensive tackle who was really stung by injuries last year. So that's a good signing because we're still a little bit thin there. Again, just adds flexibility to the Rams' approach moving forward, especially in the draft. Not boxed into a corner. Well, in one position, they actually still are boxed in, but Murchison brought back on board. I think there will be a couple more signings, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but before the NFL draft. And rehashing the Rams' unrestricted free agents, the ones that are still out there. I'm not listing on this on the YouTube channel. Got a little visual here, not listing the ones the Rams have already brought back. But moving on, Michael Hoyt, who actually is suspended for 6 games, signed by the Bills, and he had a violation of the drug enhancement program that they have. So he is out for 6 weeks. Christian Roseboom has moved on, as has Hunter Long, Bobby Brown, Demarcus Robinson with the 49ers, and Neville Gallimore and Jake Hummel also moving on. And former Rams unrestricted free agents that are still available, Akilla Witherspoon, Troy Reeder, Joe Noteboom, John Johnson, and Connor McDermott. And I think the ones that are probably most likely going to be brought back, I think, would be Witherspoon and Tyler Johnson. I'm not saying they will be. I'm not sure what the odds on that are, but I think Tyler Johnson would be a good guy to round out this receiver room. We'll talk about that position group along with all the others in a minute here. And Witherspoon. Hey, we'll talk about the cornerbacks as well. I think we're missing one key ingredient there. So let's start with the quarterbacks. We'll look at each position group, and we have Matthew Stafford, Jimmy G, and Stetson Bennett pretty squared away there. Is Stetson Bennett the answer as far as our future quarterback? Probably not. Jimmy G provides the stability as far as from a backup perspective. And then Matthew Stafford's solid, of course. And so we have to consider what is the Rams' plans moving forward for the next Matthew Stafford, our next starting quarterback in 2026 or 2027, whenever that may come. Is it going to be this year or next that they make a move on their future quarterback? And that remains to be seen. Better crop next year. And I think that's what the Rams will do. But if there's a guy that they like, and there's a couple of good ones that could be there in the third, fourth round, they could make a move on a quarterback this year. I'm betting against it, but it's entirely possible. But as far as this year goes, no need as far as this group goes this year, that's for sure. Feel pretty good about it. And is Stetson Bennett going to be on this roster, come opening day? Possibly not. But if he's our third guy, our emergency quarterback, I'm okay with that. The running back room, Kyren Williams, Blake Corum, and Cody Schrader. That's it right now. Now, Ronnie Rivers was a restricted free agent. The Rams did not tender him an offer, but he will likely be back, I would guess, and that would solidify this room. I'm not sure if Cody Schrader is the answer as the third running back. Need another guy for sure. It's probably going to be a veteran, but they will draft a running back. We'll talk about that at the end here. But this room, the running back room, pretty solid on the top end. Need another guy, though, whether it's Ronnie Rivers and a rookie or probably, one of each would be my guess. The tight ends, Tyler Higbee, Colby Parkinson, and Davis Allen. I think we need a fourth one, right? And it's even more important because we're just not confident about the health of Tyler Higbee moving forward, right? If he goes down, we could be in really big trouble. So we'll address at the end here what the Rams need to do as far as our tight ends go. Wide receivers, pretty talented on the top end. Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams. Tutu Atwell, he's brought back as the presumed number 3 guy, but don't count out Jordan Whittington. We've seen him, just enough of him, I think, to realize he's going to be a guy that gets some snaps and contributes. Just a matter of how much. Hopefully he's not a guy that just gets shelled for another season. I think he's going to contribute in some fashion on the offense as well as special teams, of course. And Xavier Smith, kind of the same deal, more of a specialist, special teams guy. Rams have some work to do here, though. Going to have to add a wide receiver or 2. And let's see, the offensive line. We've talked about this a couple of times, and with the addition of Coleman Shelton, we should be in good shape here on the interior. Now on the graphic here, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, still listing Bo Limmer as a starter. That's only fair to him, I think. Pretty solid across the front there. Lyric Jackson, Steve Avila, Bo Limmer, Kevin Dotson, and Rob Havenstein. And as Sean McVay said, even before signing Shelton, really likes the guards here. Justin Dedich, Dylan McMahon, and Shelton now. I'm not sure about the depth as far as the tackle positions go. Warren McClendon, A.J. Akuri, and K.T. Leviston. And I thought they would address depth at tackle before they would do so on the interior. So I think they need to add a guy here unless they feel really good about McClendon and Leviston. But I don't know how they could based on what we've seen, especially with Leviston. McClendon did get some opportunities. I think he played okay, but how good would we feel about him sliding in for a Lyric Jackson or Rob Havenstein? Not so sure about that. Hey, and maybe he'll prove me wrong. Special teams, pretty well set there. Ethan Evans, Joshua Carty, and Alex Ward. I got a picture of Alex Ward here from his Central Florida days. I couldn't find one of an action photo of Alex Ward in a Rams uniform. He's pretty solid, though. Don't talk about him enough. And, we also have some returners in the house, Xavier Smith and Jordan Whittington, and maybe even Blake Corum. The defensive line, the addition of Poona Ford and bringing back Laurel Murchison really makes me feel so much better about this unit. Pretty solid up front. The starters, Braden Fisk, Poona Ford, and Kobe Turner, pretty dang good. And you're rotating Murchison, Davis, and Deshaun Johnson in. Deshaun, more of a 5 technique, has some limitations, but when he's had his chances, he has played pretty well, especially recently at the end of last season. So do they need to add a body here? Maybe for depth, in the draft, more likely than free agency. And then the edge outside linebacker group, Michael Hoyt has moved on. Jared Verse and Byron Young are the starters, obviously. Brennan Jackson, Nick Hampton, and Keir Thomas can all contribute, have all played well. Shouldn't really say that about Brennan Jackson yet. We're holding out hope he can. He only had 47 snaps last season, and most of those came in that Week 18 game against the Seahawks. Nick Hampton and Keir Thomas have both shown flashes. And I've gone back and forth on this. Do the Rams need to add a veteran? Well, probably not. Do they need to draft an edge rusher? I don't think they necessarily have to. One or the other, I think, though, they'll add an edge rusher to complement this group because, I don't know, maybe it's a little thin after Verse and Young. These guys will likely be able to contribute, Jackson, Hampton, and Thomas, but they're not going to be the types of guys that, strike fear into the heart of offensive lines, I'm afraid. Inside linebackers, and this is where it's the thinnest of all, Omar Spates and Elias Neal. Now, Neal, an undrafted rookie in 2024, played pretty well in the Rams preseason and actually appeared in 5 games before being moved to the practice squad. So maybe he's a guy the Rams like, not as a starter, but at least for depth. And, Ram fans have said they're not going to draft an inside linebacker in the first round. Well, we'll talk about that in a minute when we get to our final assessment of what the Rams need to do roster-wise. But this group is probably the most alarming at this point, with Jake Hummel, Christian Roseboom moving on. Troy Reeder still out there, but I don't think he's the answer. Probably all agree on that, unless he comes back as a backup. But need some work here. And there's some free agents on the market. We talked about that last episode, who could be brought in. Kaiser, White, guys like that. Let's talk about this cornerback group. A lot of guys here, a lot of good players. Darius Williams, Kobe Durant, Emmanuel Forbes, Darion Kendrick, Sean Jolly, Charles Woods, Josh Wallace. What is missing here, though? A difference maker, in my opinion. And, even if we bring back Ahkello Witherspoon, he'd probably immediately become our best cornerback. I mean, actually, for sure he would be. But I still want more. I want better. I'd love to have an elite corner. But if we had to roll with this group on opening day, I guess I'd be okay with it. But I'd still be a little disappointed that we hadn't improved this group. And without Ahkello, actually, I think we might be in a little bit of trouble. Need to bring back Ahkello at a minimum. If not, add a CB1 or draft one high. The safety group, kind of small right now. Cameron Curl, Cam Kinchins, Quentin Lake, Jalen McCullough. Now, these guys are very versatile, as are some of our cornerbacks. So I think it'd be a mistake to say we only have four guys that can play on the back end for us. But all four of these guys are pretty darn good players. I like the upside of Kendrins and McCullough. Quentin Lake, not given enough love for the way he plays and all the snaps he takes. And Cameron Curl proved to be a pretty steady force back there. Need to add somebody here. It could be John Johnson, a veteran, or a late draft pick. Need to find a fifth pure safety, I think. But this group's in pretty good shape overall. So let's go through each group one last time, and I'll try to assess how I think the Rams need to address a possible need here on the YouTube channel. Got a little graph here for you. For those of you listening on the podcast, audio only, I'll walk you through it. Quarterback, well, we already signed Jimmy G. We got Stetson Bennett in the house and Matthew Stafford, one of the top quarterbacks in the league. No need to bring in a free agent, that's for sure. The draft, now, there has been talk about the Rams drafting their quarterback of the future as early as this year so they can, this player, unnamed player, could, serve under Matthew Stafford's tutelage for a year or two. That could wait till next year. However, be a better draft of quarterbacks next year, better players available, but kind of a question mark. If they would draft a quarterback this year would not surprise me at all. Running back, Ronnie Rivers is still out there. Ideally, they would bring him back, check the free agent box. They will, I predict, draft a running back regardless. Wide receiver, bring back Tyler Johnson or someone like him to serve as the sixth or potentially seventh wide receiver. That would be great. I expect them to do that. I also expect them to draft a wide receiver, really good wide receiver draft. Sean McVay will not be able to help himself. Tight end, now it depends on how the Rams feel about Tyler Higbee, and we can only guess, health-wise I'm talking about, could they bring in another tight end, an experienced tight end, just in case Tyler can't go and you don't have to roll with Colby Parkinson and Davis Allen? But is there any difference makers, guys that could slide in and really fill that void? I'm not so sure. I think it's possible they bring in a free agent. I think it is pretty much a foregone conclusion they will draft a tight end. And again, a lot of good tight ends in this draft, very deep. They will draft a tight end regardless. Offensive tackle, kind of interesting. You got your two starters in place. The backups, I'm not convinced that they're going to be able to carry the load if called upon. I could see the Rams adding a free agent offensive tackle, a proven one, certainly not a top line offensive tackle, but some insurance. And I could also see them drafting an offensive tackle. Now, you could probably find your next right tackle with Rob Havenstein getting up there in years, in the third or fourth round. So I think it's possible. That's probably the biggest question mark for me. I have no idea what the Rams will do here with Alaric Jackson signed. I think that can wait for another year. They bring in a free agent next year or the year after. Interior offensive line, I don't see any point in bringing in another free agent. Pretty good group, as we discussed. I don't think the Rams, you can ever dismiss the possibility that they would draft an interior offensive lineman. No, wouldn't be a high pick, a later round pick, someone they like. Someone like Bo Limmer, they got him in the 6th round last year, was it? So could see that happening again. And on the defensive side, no more defensive line free agents required at this point. I think they're in pretty good shape. Murchison in the house, along with Poona Ford. Much like the interior offensive line, I fully expect them to draft a defensive lineman. I have it as a check, green check for sure. Starting to question that. Maybe they can pass on defensive line in the draft this year. Maybe that's more of a question mark. I kind of lean towards them doing so. It depends on how many picks they end up with. There's been rumors that they're going to, try to stockpile picks next year. trading out of some spots. And if that happens, defensive line would probably come off the board. Edge is a little bit tricky. And why is it tricky? Again, you got two really good players starting. The depth is there, but nothing to get overly excited about. Competent guys for sure. But, Byron Young playing on his rookie contract, got to think about the next edge rusher. I could see them bringing in a free agent. I could see them drafting an edge rusher. I just don't think it's a big priority this year. But man, I don't even want to say, don't even want to consider the possibility that you're all thinking in your head that would lead us to needing an edge rusher in the middle of the season. Don't like to talk about injuries, but that's such an important position. Maybe they bring in a free agent. Maybe they draft an edge rusher high. And in past years, as you remember, the Daniel Hardy, Chris Garrett's of the world, the Rams do like to draft edge rushers late, but most of them have not worked out. Now, inside linebacker, pretty easy here. They need to sign a free agent and they need to draft one. Now, the problem with drafting one, people poo-pooing the idea of drafting an inside linebacker in the first round. I am not against it. I know they don't emphasize that position, but they don't have any linebackers. Spates and Neal and maybe Tony Fields. And if you want to be sure that your draft pick is going to be able to come in and play and possibly start on day one, might need to be a first round pick, unless you can, package that, move back and, pick up a late first rounder and a second rounder. Maybe there'd be someone like Chris Paul there late in the second, potentially in the third. But they're going to draft an inside linebacker. Just a question of exactly where. The cornerback group, I'd assume they're going to bring in Witherspoon or someone similar, and I expect them to draft a cornerback, and that would be one of my favorites for going in the first round. You're thinking cornerback, wide receiver, tight end at this point, potentially inside linebacker. Got to add a top-notch cornerback. We don't need another fourth or fifth rounder. We got a bunch of guys like that. We need a CB1. Safety, they're going to have to add a safety somehow, somewhere. Ideally, again, bring back one of your own guys. We talked about running back, bring back Ronnie Rivers. We talked about cornerback, bring back Akilla Witherspoon. And safety, hey, let's bring back John Johnson. And the Rams have been very successful drafting safeties late. I don't think it's a big need, but certainly not a priority, but I think they could very well draft a safety. Not a sure thing at all, but very possible. Special teams, I don't think they need to address anything there. Pretty squared away. So, you add up these green check marks here. What do I think they're going to draft for sure? Running back, wide receiver, tight end, defensive line, inside linebacker, and cornerback. And as I said, hedging on defensive line a little bit because our group of six is pretty darn good. So that's what I'm rolling with. A lot of question marks, a lot of unknowns. Free agency, I think they need to add an inside linebacker, and I think they need to add a wide receiver. Again, the wide receiver department, just bring back Tyler Johnson, a guy that knows the system. And when he had his chances, he played okay. So one last thing, Ian talked a lot about Cooper Kupp, gave him a really good goodbye episode, basically. And since then, he has signed with the Seahawks. And hey, it's worth one more time saying farewell to our friend Cooper Kupp. And on the YouTube channel here, displaying his resume. How impressive is that? Super Bowl champion, Super Bowl MVP, NFL Offensive Player of the Year, first team All-Pro in 2021, NFL Triple Crown winner that year. He was on the All-Rookie team in 2017, and in college, the FCS Player of the Decade, Offensive Player of the Year in the FCS in 2015, two-time Big Sky Offensive Player of the Year, four-time first-team FCS All-American, and some NFL records to boot. Most yards from scrimmage by a wide receiver in a single season, and most receptions in a single postseason. Cooper Kupp. And, he's going to come back to town as a Seattle Seahawk. And yeah, it kind of sort of sucks a little bit, right? But you know what? We got to welcome him back to SoFi, and I know Ram fans will. I hope the best for Cooper Kupp. Who does not love this guy as a person and as a football player? It kind of sucks that he ended up with an NFC West team, but it also makes perfect sense. He's from the state of Washington, going back to his original home. Hey, he's going to miss the sunshine, but he's not going to miss the Rams because we'll see him twice a year. And I'm kind of looking forward to him coming back to SoFi. It will not ruin my memories, the great memories I have of Cooper Kupp. So many big time catches, that big play against the Bucks, that catch against the 49ers. Oh man, in the NFC Championship game. And just what a great player. I'm kind of at a loss of words, to be honest with you. If someone asked me to tell them what is so great about Cooper Kupp, well, you know what? You got a couple hours, we can have a little talk about that. Cooper Kupp, and as Ian said, he's on his Mount Rushmore of Rams wide receivers, and that's no small feat. Isaac Bruce, Torrey Holt, Cooper Kupp, and then take your pick, Henry Ellard, Elroy Crazy Legs Hirsch, Tom Fears. Let them fight it out for the fourth spot. I got Cooper Kupp up there, just like Ian, with Isaac and Torrey. Man, the Rams wide receiver group is pretty impressive. And Cooper Kupp right up there with the best in his prime. What a great player. So goodbye to Cooper Kupp. Best of luck. We'll see you at SoFi sometime this season. Hopefully he stays healthy. I really am rooting for him. I'd love for him to kind of prove the Rams wrong, that he still had it. But at the same time, man, let's keep him out of the end zone at SoFi. How about that? That's all for now. Out here from Rams Up.